In the late 1800s, King Leopold II led Belgium to become an imperial power, but behind a veil of progress and development laid a much grimmer truth, one of oppression, tyranny, enslavement, and unchecked greed. His rule was characterized by cruelty that still haunts Congo today. Despite his significant contributions to the development of Belgium as a nation, Leopold I's legacy was forever tarnished by his actions in Africa. King Leopold II believed that in order for a country to achieve historical significance, it needed to have a colony. He saw economic opportunities in colonizing and believed it could help spread Western civilization. However, as a constitutional monarch, Leopold II had limited power in Belgium, and his government did not share his interest in colonialism. Despite this, Leopold II set his sights on the Congo, a largely unexplored and unclaimed territory in sub-Saharan Africa, as a way to gain more power and enrich himself. He knew he couldn't count on his government's support and saw an opportunity in the Congo. To legitimize his plan to acquire the Congo, King Leopold II organized the Brussels Geographic Conference in 1876. At the conference, he proposed the establishment of a holding company called the Association Internationale Africaine, which was later renamed as the Comité d'études du Haut-Congo, and finally as the Association Internationale du Congo in 1879. King Leopold II used the Association Internationale Africaine as a front for his colonial activities, providing him with a recognized and seemingly philanthropic platform. As part of the AIA's mission, Leopold pledged to suppress the East African slave trade, ensure free trade with the colony, and promote humanitarian policies. These measures were meant to divert attention from Leopold's ambitions in the Congo and justify his actions to his critics. During the year 1878, King Leopold II recruited a man proficient in journalism and exploration by the name of Henry Morton Stanley. This individual shared similar economic interests as that of His Majesty within Africa. Between 1874 and 1877, Mr. Stanley journeyed through Congo prior to being hired for his services relating to conducting an examination on areas situated along Congo River during the late 19th century. It was conducted in the spell of time lasting throughout all 12 months following said recruitment. Stanley's exploration of the Congo was carried out on behalf of Leopold's holding company, which claimed to be dedicated to promoting free trade and suppressing the slave trade. When Stanley returned to the Congo in 1882, he had negotiated treaties with more than 500 chiefs. However, these chiefs did not fully understand the nature of the agreements they had signed and had only received small gifts in exchange for marking their signatures on the mysterious papers presented to them. These agreements involved accepting the flag of the Congo Association. Leopold II was not the only person to recognize the potential of Africa, and numerous explorers also sought to claim territories on the continent. This era of colonization and competition for African land became known as the Scramble for Africa. During the period of 1884 through to 1885, there was a gathering in Berlin for European major powers. They were present with one aim. They wanted to divvy up all African territories available at that point in time. In spite of other powerful authoritative figures being present, King Leopold II used his exceptional diplomacy skills and played these influential leaders against each other until he secured Congo River Basin for himself, completely uncontested by anyone else. Later on, after accomplishing this task successfully done, King Leopold then renamed it into something different, the Congo Free State, which gave him an unprecedented control over land, measuring 8 times greater than the size Belgium had at its peak as country. Although the Berlin Conference resulted in agreements to eradicate the slave trade and protect the rights of local populations, Europe lacked the means to enforce these agreements. As a result, Leopold II was able to pursue his primary goal of making the Congo commercially profitable, even though this involved ignoring the ban on slavery. Due to the increasing demand for rubber from the growing bicycle and automobile industry, much of the world's rubber supply was found in the Congo. Local people were forced to work in harsh conditions to collect the rubber, often being required to meet inhumane quotas that were impossible to achieve. The indigenous people were made to slash vines and apply the rubber to their bodies before scraping it off into baskets. These practices were inhumane and caused great suffering for the workers. Terrible repercussions would occur if these quotas were not met. Whippings with a chicote, mutilation, or death. Those who refused to supply labor, rubber, or ivory suffered the same fate. Leopold II created his own personal force, the Force Publique, to guarantee that the rubber quotas were reached and any possible uprisings were put down. This army's men were drawn from numerous tribes in the Congo, Zanzibar, and British West Africa. To demonstrate that they had killed a villager who had failed to fulfill quotas, the troops were forced to chop off the deceased's hands and submit them to their commanders. Officers were concerned that ammunition was being wasted on shooting animals for enjoyment, which is why severed hands were required as proof. Desperate measures were taken, as the quantity of chopped-off hands could pay for an unfulfilled rubber quota. There were even skirmishes between villages to produce enough hands, and troops would cut them off from the locals, living or dead. Leon Rom was the ruthless administrator in command of the Force Publique. He was reputed to cover his flower with the decapitated heads of his victims, and to have a gallows outside his Stanley Falls home. Leopold II depleted resources and enslaved the people in order to maximize his short-term economic benefits. He was able to earn a substantial salary and acquire personal wealth as a result of this. However, this was insufficient to ensure its viability, and further investments were required. Between 1889 and 1895, the king borrowed money from his own government in exchange for the right to conquer the Congo in 1901. That year, the authorities opted not to take advantage of the chance, allowing Leopold to continue his exploitation. Beginning around 1890, the atrocities became increasingly obvious. George Washington Williams, an African-American Baptist pastor, traveled across the Congo Free State that year. He was outraged by what he witnessed and sent an open letter to the king criticizing the people's cruel and inhumane treatment. He said that the crimes committed were done in the king's name, and even though he hadn't set one foot in the Congo, he would still be just as guilty. Unfortunately, Williams died on the way home, and therefore the king didn't feel compelled to investigate the accusations. But after this letter, other reports soon followed. A public outrage in the beginning of 1904, after European press revelations of what actually was going on in the Congo, led to an international protest. Prominent writers such as Arthur Conan Doyle and Mark Twain took part in these condemnations. Twain wrote a pamphlet called King Leopold's Soliloquy, and Doyle later in 1909 published The Crime of the Congo after supporting the campaign for reforms. Joseph Conrad visited the Congo colony, which inspired him to write the novel Heart of Darkness, and Leon Rom may have been the basis for the character of Kurtz. While the precise number of deaths is uncertain, several sources suggest that the loss of the population was caused by genocide, followed by starvation, exhaustion, and exposure. Diseases also played a significant role, including the naturally occurring sleeping sickness spread by tsetse flies. Symptoms of the disease included fever, headaches, and joint pain, followed by hallucinations, coma, and death. Europeans introduced other diseases, such as venereal diseases and smallpox. Additionally, the birth rate declined along with the population. Edmund Dane Morel, an individual who was instrumental in revealing the heinous acts committed in Congo, stated that prior to Leopold's reign over it, the territory boasted a populace of 20 million. Mark Twain, another prominent figure with sharp criticism, speculated around 10 million met their fate at this time. It can consequently be approximated that close to 50% of individuals perished through these events. Although there isn't any exact number about fatalities under Leopold's oppressive regime available as yet, but sources suggest they could potentially run into millions.